want to take the opportunity just to put the chapel in context and introduce that each year Americans observe what is known as National Latino Heritage Month, which runs from September 15th to October 15th. And this is done by celebrating the histories, cultures, and contributions of American citizens whose ancestors came from Spain, Mexico, the Caribbean, Central and South America. The observation for this month started in 1968 as Hispanic Heritage Week under President Lyndon Johnson and was expanded by President Ronald Reagan in 1988 to cover a 30-day period starting from the 15th of September and ending on the 15th of October. And it was enacted into law on August 17th, 1988. The day of September 15th is significant because it is the anniversary of independence for the following Latin American countries: Costa Rica, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, and Nicaragua. In addition, Mexico and Chile celebrate their Independence Days on September 16th and September 18th. So as members of the Biola community, our convictions run deeper. We remember our mission to equip men and women in mind and character to impact the world for our Lord Jesus Christ, and also our university aspirations 4 and 5, to cultivate competent and courageous graduates and to build a cross-cultural Christian community, all reflecting the breadth and depth of diversity of peoples that make up God's kingdom here on earth as well as in heaven. So here is where we find our deepest commitment to celebrating diversity and from learning from one another. So in keeping with this year's theme, Spirit and Story, today we will hear the narratives from members of our community, members of the body of Christ from different Latino heritages. So what I'll do is just introduce them very quickly and briefly here because they're going to share more of who they are themselves. But to share first would be a junior and a sociology major. That's Jamie Castro. Second, coming up, he's an alumni who studied marketing here at Biola. He's a hip-hop artist and poet, Lois Rena. And then followed by senior Bible major, Monica Gonzalez. So, are we ready? Okay, well, let's welcome up first, Jamie.
Good morning, Biola. Awesome. So like Glenn mentioned, I'm a junior sociology major, and I'm also a first-generation American. Both of my parents emigrated from Nicaragua during a time of war. My parents grew up in the capital city of Nicaragua, Managua de Riamba, and my father's side of the family was considered to be pretty poor, and my mom's side of the family was about middle class, but even the upper class in Nicaragua is still pretty lower class here in the US, since Nicaragua is a third world country. And so despite the fact that my mom had maids and servants living with her, she was still expected to get up at 4 in the morning to prepare breakfast for her parents, to clean and do other responsibilities before going to school. And she tries to have the same expectations for me, and I'm like, no, Mom, I'm not gonna get up at 4 in the morning. But she started doing that when she was around 13 years old, and since I was at that age, she would always be like, Jamie, I was cooking when I was your age. Jamie, I was cleaning. Jamie, I was doing this. And I'm like, well, Mom, you tell me to go to school, and that's what I'm doing. That's what I'm gonna do. And now that I'm 20, she can't really tell me that because when she was 20, she got married, she eloped, and so she definitely does not tell me, Jamie, go elope. So that's awesome that now that I'm older, she can't really tell me those kinds of things. I'm sorry, so with the hardworking ethic, I'm not completely sure if that's a Nicaraguan type of culture aspect, but I definitely know that growing up, it was inflicted on me and my siblings to be really hardworking. And just like a funny side story, both of my grandmas are about 65 years old right now, if not older. One of my grandmas always lies about her age, so I don't know exactly how old she is. But one of my grandmas, she decided to prune a tree. So she was up on the ladder and nobody was around, and she fell. She hit her head and she passed out on the sidewalk. And my uncle, thankfully, was able to take her to the hospital just to make sure that everything was fine. And she was in the hospital for about 2 days. And when she was dismissed, guess what she did? She went back to pruning the tree. And we're just like, Grandma, like, no, calm down, you need to rest, you're past retirement age. But she just does not quit. Neither of my grandmas have the mindset that there is a retirement. They're not comfortable, just sitting down and having coffee. Like, they have to be serving, they have to be working. And that type of mindset has been passed down to my mom and my dad, and they've passed it down to myself as well. I don't do hardworking labor, but I definitely work hard in school and in church and other aspects of my life. But anyways, like I had mentioned, I don't know if I mentioned it, but my parents met when they were 12 years old. They met at church. Imagine that this is a church. My mom was in the front pew, my dad was all the way in the back, and he saw the back of her head and fell in love. And so it took a while for my mom to reciprocate those feelings, but he was persistent, and eventually they did end up together. But unfortunately, at that time that she finally started reciprocating the feelings, the Civil War started. And so life became really difficult. They had times when they couldn't leave their house. Their food was rationed out. My dad, I hate spaghetti, but my mom always cooks spaghetti. And I'll be like, Mom, I don't want to eat the spaghetti. And my dad's like, well, when I was in the war, I had to eat leaves with salt. So you're going to eat your spaghetti because you're blessed to have it. And yeah, I do acknowledge I am very blessed with the life that I've had, and it might not have been much from what I've had so far, but it's definitely better than what my parents had at my age. But yeah, so because of the war, my parents couldn't continue to be together. My mom came to the US with a visa when she was 15, and she had a really difficult time when she first came. Thankfully, she was able to enroll in high school, but the school that she went to was 3 hours away. And so she had to take the bus to school, and during that time, she experienced some really horrible things like sexual abuse, both verbal, physical, and emotional. Men would get close to her and whisper really, really horrible things in her ear, and they would rub up against her, they would flash her. And because of that, I grew up really, really overprotected from those types of situations, which I'm thankful for, but at the same time, I'm like, I want to go to my friend's house, but my parents didn't really let me. And I understand why. I understand that they have all this trauma from what they experienced, and so I'm thankful that they've been there to protect me from those types of situations. But my mom, she was kind of forced to graduate early. Even though she did work during high school, she also went to a lot of summer school. And so she had the credits to graduate, but she didn't have the preparation to work. She still did not speak English, and she was never taught any work skills or work ethics. So they told her, you have enough credits, you need to graduate. And even though she tried her best to not graduate, which is kind of funny, I mean, who wants to stay in high school? But she was forced to graduate, and immediately she started working in downtown LA in a factory. And again, she had to take public transportation, and she continued to experience the sexual abuse from the men that she encountered. And my dad, he had a visa, but only for Mexico, so he did come to California illegally. And during this time, it was about a 2 to 3 year period, my parents had no contact whatsoever, because even if my mom did try and send letters to my dad, Nicaragua was under communist rule, so no outside communication was allowed to come into the country. And so my parents had pretty much given up their relationship as lost, but it just so happened that when my dad came to California, the people who drove him here coincidentally dropped him off at my mom's house. And so he just knocked on the door, and my mom answered, and she's like, what are you doing here? So that's really awesome that they were able to meet, and I'm sure that was God, and I'm really thankful for that. But even with that, it still wasn't easy for them to get back into the relationship that they once had. Animosity had grown between both of my families. I like to joke with my parents and say they have a Romeo-Juliet type of relationship, except they haven't died, so that's good. But yeah, my mom's dad never approved of my dad because of bad blood between the families. And so for the next 3 years, they saw each other secretly, and they raised funds. And once they were able to rent their own apartment, they eloped and they moved in together. And my mom was shunned for a number of years from her side of the family. And the only thing she was able to take with my dad was the clothes that was on her back. Everything else was either burned or thrown out by my grandfather. And so once my parents started living on their own, they were never really living on their own, because my dad always took in family that needed help, and he would always send money back to Nicaragua or give money to his mom or his brothers and sisters that needed money. And so a year after they were married, my brother was born, so my mom became a homemaker. And although she was happy about not having to work, she didn't really have the opportunity to leave the house. And my dad was essentially taking care of the money. So she wasn't really given the say as to how the money was being spent. So often my mom, during the first few years of her marriage, didn't have anything to do, and all the money that we were receiving was essentially going out to helping other people. So we kind of always grew up poor, and for the first 14 years of my life, I lived with essentially my whole family. Sometimes it would be like a 2-3 bedroom house with like 15 people in there, and it was really fun for me because I always had my cousins to play with, but the family would always be like arguing and everything. But during this time, I really learned the value of family, because despite all the arguments and just the fighting that goes on, I mean, you guys live in dorms. I don't live in dorms, but you guys live in dorms, so you know how living in close contact with people can often take a strain on relationships, and it's the same with family. But despite the strain on the relationships of living in such close quarters with each other, our family has been triumphant in love, especially the love that comes with Christ, and just being able to overcome all of the bad incidents that have occurred. And so when I turned 14, we moved to Riverside, and that's kind of when I experienced a move from the poverty that I had been in my whole life. And I lived in this really nice neighborhood, and it was just a really nice house, and I was like, yay, I finally have my own room, because I had always shared it with my parents and my sisters and brothers. And then my parents decided to become foster parents, which I love. That's one of the reasons why I'm a sociology major now. But at that time, I was just like, oh, I don't get my own room anymore. So I was kind of bummed about that. But just in my childhood, I have always gone to elementary, middle, and high schools where the predominant races were minority races. In one of the elementary schools I remember I went to, there was one Caucasian, and he was always bullied and picked on because he was a minority. Even though it was minority races, there was only one Caucasian. And so when I didn't decide to come to Biola, but when I came to Biola, I knew that it was going to be predominantly white students in here. And I didn't really know how that was going to affect me. I don't know if it was going to have an effect at all. But now that I'm here, I know that it has had an effect, and it's definitely been a positive one. In being able to communicate with people who look different from me, I've been able to learn about different cultures, and especially in my sociology classes, we talk about culture a lot, and I've had some classmates say, well, I don't know what my culture is. I'm American. I don't know what that means to be, or I don't know what my culture is. But if you reflect and if you really think about it, you can find culture. One of the assignments that I'm doing right now is having to ask people of different races, as well as Caucasian, what it means to be white. And I asked one of my sister's friends, and she's like 15. I was like, what does it mean to be white? And she's like, oh, it means to eat hot dogs and hamburgers. And I'm like, no, that's not what it means to be white. But that's just kind of the perception that people have. And so coming here to Biola, I've learned a lot about my own culture, because when I was her age, I didn't know what it meant to be white, and I didn't know what it meant to be Nicaraguan either. I still don't know a lot what it means, but I'm learning, and that's what I love about my time here right now, is that I'm definitely in a time of learning, both about myself and about you guys, my classmates, my peers, and my brothers and sisters in Christ. And so just before I leave, I just want to leave you guys with this. I saw a Biola confession. I'm gonna get to that too. I think it was like a few weeks ago, and I don't remember exactly what it said, but it was something along the lines of, if we're all one-minded people, why is Biola pushing diversity so much? And like when I sat there, I wanted to say something so badly, but I didn't know how to word it. And I still don't know exactly how to word what I'm thinking, but I'm gonna try. So unity does not equal uniformity. God created us all different, and it's all to glorify him and his creativity. But just because I look different from Glenn, or I look different from Tamara, or I look different from the majority of Biola, does not mean that we can't be unified in Christ. We are to celebrate our differences and acknowledge that just because we're different doesn't mean that one person is better than the other. And so we can be like-minded people with differences, and we're to use these differences to further the kingdom of God. And so thank you, and have a wonderful day.
Just a kid with a love for rhymes, always speak what's on my mind, with a mom who tied him right, and the pop's always gone at night. See, pool sticks were his strongest vice. Play a game, gotta name your price. I never asked him for a quarter, cause he held that money tight. Putting 8 balls on that corner. What about your lovely daughter? Where's her prescription order? Mom prayed to her restorer. All her sadness turned to yelling. I just hear my father swearing. My mother keeps on yelling, and these fights were never ending, but church was my escape to get away from all the madness. Rhymes became a way for me to deal with the damage. My mother kept on praying, she just lifted up her marriage. It took over a decade, but my father left us gambling. Yes, I believe in God, and I believe in music. Despite all that they say, I know that he can use it, so I rewrite and I rewrite and I rewrite all these verses, so please forgive me, people, but I want them to be perfect. I'm broadcasting my purpose when I'm writing down these verses. If the situation worsens, it just makes a better person. So here I am, you can see me if you listen. Shaped by inner city living, and I know that I'm not finished. I hope that Jesus increases, and I hope that I diminish. If you take a careful look, then you can see that I'm the blemish. I still get LA mad, pull down my Dodger cap, talk loose and have no tact, just tell them to get back. I vent it all to Jay, then I feel relaxed. Thank God for this art I have. Thank God that I'm on this path. I hope that it lifts you up when you listen to my raps. I hope that it all takes off. Lately I feel so lost. When I clock in for this job, I feel my spirit drop. I just want so much more. Why walk when you can soar? God, show me which way to go. Just a kid with a love for rhymes, always speak what's on my mind, with a mom who tied him right, and pop's always gone that night. See, I'm not an artisan. See, I'm not a charlatan. I'm an artisan. Talents I'm harnessing, and I put my all in this. Some people hate that poem. They're like, that's too personal, bro. Like, it's too personal. You need to kind of tone it down. But I believe in, one thing that I learned here at Biola is to speak for myself, share my experience, you know? I feel kind of like that poem really reflects kind of like my childhood. It really reflects my faith, my culture, my ethnicity. My mother's a hardcore Christian woman. I remember waking up for school and seeing her praying at 6 in the morning, you know, consistently. I was like, why isn't she sleeping? You know? My father really had no faith. Like, he grew up Catholic, but he wasn't a devout Catholic. He was a devout Christian. He was just there in the house, you know? I thank God because, in all honesty, as I reflect, now that I'm older and I reflect on my the life that I lived, it's like my dad spent a lot of time in pool halls gambling. That was his thing. But in all honesty, I thank God that I didn't have to deal with alcoholism or abuse, and I thank God that He moved in my father's heart, and my father left it. You know, left the gambling, left the pool sticks and all that stuff. I remember being a kid and him being like, you know, just that typical cliche story of, don't tell your mom, and I'm gonna buy you some toys or whatever, you know? Totally did that. But that was my dad, that was my mom. and I feel like a reflection of my culture, of my ethnicity, of my ethnic culture, like a Mexican thing, is that it's very matriarchal. I came to Biola because of my mother. I believe in Christ because of my mother. I was in church because of my mother. Like, she still calls me on Sundays. It's like, did you go to church? And I can't lie, that, like, there's a part of me that's still intimidated to this day. And even if I didn't go, I was like, yeah, Mom, of course. Lies. Lord, forgive me. But I feel like there's a stereotype, there might be like the perception of like Mexican culture being very macho, machista, and all this stuff. But in all actuality, my experience, and I believe the true reflection, is that we're a matriarchal culture. You know, I once read this poet, his name's Gabriel Garcia Marquez. He wrote, "Men might be the head of the household, but women are the neck, and they decide where the head is looking." So that was my experience with my family, with faith, where I got it. I grew up in the inner city, so very much so, like, the first 4 minutes of me being up here is because of the inner city. A lot of the way that I deal with my emotions is because of the inner city. Just angry, like, creativity and anger were my ways of dealing with it. I remember when growing up, I was really kind of like at a fork in the road my senior year. Being in the inner city, it's like there's so many influences, you know? There's so many just things that 17-year-olds should not be doing accessible, very, very accessible. And I feel like I had a choice, you know? It's like Biola, heaven, any other university, hell. Like, seriously, that's how it felt, you know? I chose to come to Biola just as a conscience effort. I was like, man, if I don't go to Biola, who knows what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna end up like Tony Montana if I don't go to Biola. And I came to Biola. There was a bit of a culture shock, you know. I think I expected Christianity to be uniform too. I expected faith. I expected sermons, worship to be consistent, you know. I sat in some chapels, maybe similar to how you felt when you walked in. And you're like, what is this Spanish song? I don't know it. What's the melody? I can't even sing to this. That was kind of like my experience. There was a lot of culture clash. I think one thing that I kind of, because this whole inner city upbringing and how I dealt with things, there was some questions that I was asked that I responded to, like, what, did you just really ask me that? You know, like, hey, you're Mexican, why don't you like soccer? What, did you just really ask me that? You know, like, I feel like, you know, there was a lot of that. And it's not right. It's not right. But my response wasn't always right either. I feel like there's the value of diversity is just the things that we can learn from each other. The life experiences that we have are different, and we can learn from that. We bring that experience into a classroom, into our faith, and we learn from that. You know, when I was at Biola, it's like I can't wait to get out. You know, now that I'm out of Biola, like, I miss this environment. I miss being around a faith-based community. I know that sometimes, like, for minority students, it's difficult to be in a camp. It's difficult sometimes. There's just a lot of questions that you get asked, a lot of emotions. But there's some insight that you have to share with the rest of the Biola community. And to the Biola community, it's like, I want to publicly kind of apologize for all the anger that I carried around when I was, like, you know, a student here. And for the relationships that could have been something, but my anger prevented me from that, you know. But I'm here, you know, I'm back. Like, I love this campus, I love this school, I love the vision that Glenn has. I love the vision that God is giving Glenn. The vision, well, what we see throughout the Bible, just the reconciliation of cultures, of Jews, Gentiles, Romans, Ethiopians, and I love that I serve a God who sees beauty in that and created that intentionally. I thank God for his creativity, for his love, for the different experiences that we all have. I know it's shaped me to be who I am. Had I not come to Biola, Tony Montana, had I not gone to Biola, I think I would have had just a very drastically different experience. I might have been just culturally segregated and not aware of my own cultural segregation, you know? Yeah, anyway, if you guys want to talk, I'll be right there. Thank you guys.
Hello, everybody. My name is Monica Gonzalez. I am a senior biblical studies major here at Biola, and I am Latina. I shouldn't assume that you know what that means to me. So I want to share with you a piece of my story. And what purpose does this have? It's because I need you, and you need me. This is my story. And I want to share this because I am empowered in this fellowship of interdependence of this kingdom community. So I want to share with you guys the story. So I grew up in a Latino bilingual home. And between two cities, in San Francisco and Daly City. They're both so different. They're neighboring cities up in the Bay Area, and so you guys probably know San Francisco. And I think growing up, I grew up in a place that allowed me to flourish, to be whatever I wanted to be. I didn't feel, in this diverse setting, I was not restricted to be a certain type of person, but I was allowed to be creative. I was allowed to have a voice. I would go to restaurants, or I would go to bakeries and see people like Mexican artists like Pedro Infante that I grew up and Maria Felix, these amazing people that were just displays of beautiful artistry in Mexico. And so I grew up, and so in these places where I was celebrated, I was embraced. I saw murals on the walls of buildings, and I was welcomed in that place. I was celebrated. My people were celebrated. So my dad is from Mexico, and my mom is from El Salvador. I also have a younger brother, his name is Andres, and so my mom's story has a huge influence on my life. Her decisions affected everything about who I am today. And so she came to this country. She was 14 years old, and she had to cross many borders to get here. She left everything that she loved in order to survive. She left El Salvador, the place where she used to eat green mangoes, where she played basketball under the hot sun, where she used to hear those rainstorms in Central America that just poured down like the sky's about to fall. And she grew up in this place ended up though with final memories of pain and suffering, and death and fear, and because the Civil War had started and my mom's life was at risk. So when she came here, she suffered a lot. She was mocked for her accent. She was displaced, and she had to live with her mom, who was a stern, kind of a hardworking woman, was not really present in her life. But in the midst of all of this, she encountered God. She encountered him about 30 years ago today, and she, in the church that I still call home. She strived forward with strength from God alone. And she learned the English language. She went to high school, and she graduated from Mission High in San Francisco, and she was able to become a citizen. And she did some college, and she met a young Mexican man in church and Bible school, and they got married. And she was able to find a steady job. So both of my parents created this space for me to flourish, to grow, to be free, to live in this environment where, to love my heritage, to love the land that they came from, to celebrate the food, to love the Spanish language. This Spanish is not just like this, oh yeah, something that I use, but it's something that I communicate with to the people that I love, that I hold to be really special in my life. So they have created this safe space. They were present in my life, and I was able to be a child when I was a child. I was able to play dolls named Teresa, who had the brown hair and the tan skin, so I was able to be a child. I was able to be a teenager when I was a teenager, where my only responsibilities were education, to be a good steward of my education, to know, to be smart, to be intelligent, something my mom was a huge proponent of. To love God more than anything in my life. That was huge. Just coming from a really rich kind of Christian heritage as well, like from all the way back from Mexico. So no, we didn't have a luxurious house. I didn't have all these kind of bonus, things, but I was protected, I was safe. And I realized at a young age that this was not the same for everyone in the Latino community. I didn't have to worry about translating tax forms for my parents. I didn't have to translate job applications for my parents, school forms for my parents. I didn't have to worry about working or providing for my family, to help my parents. I did not have to worry about where my next meal was going to come from. I didn't have to worry about whether I was going to go to college or not. It was because education was huge. It was like I knew that was the next step. I didn't have to live with anxiety that my parents were going to be taken away from me because they were undocumented. I experienced a sense of privilege growing up. However, these experiences that I mentioned, these are stories of many people that I know. In my church community, with my family, with friends, my cousins, my tias and my tios, my uncles and my aunties, just living with immigrant family members who did not have the resources to be educated here. So they had to fight to find jobs. So my cousins had to live in rougher parts of the city. They didn't have the same open doors that I did to go to college. So the contrast is so visible. And so as a senior, I think about ministry. I think about the Christian life. I think about my experience that compels me to love and proclaim the gospel of Jesus Christ, as well as doing works of compassion and justice. It compels me to think about injustice in the Latino community, because shame on me if I turn a blind eye and a deaf ear to the cries that I've heard and to the suffering that I've seen. Yes, my life must reflect, I know that my life must reflect faith and works. They're not meant to be separated. They exist together. They must exist together. So acts of love and grace to the immigrant, to the poor, to the widow, to the orphan. Because in this gospel-centered kingdom, they need me and I also need them. And the grace and the love of Jesus' rescue is much bigger than we might know or that we might have dwelt in before. It's bigger than him just saving my soul, but he's saving every single aspect of my life, because it covers and redeems, and it must redeem everything of who we are. So I pray, Biola, that you would have eyes to see and ears to hear those cries, the suffering, the joy, the celebration of my people, of the Latino community. And I pray that you would listen, that you would take it in as your own as well. Thank you.
Biola University offers a variety of biblically centered degree programs, ranging from business to ministry to the arts and sciences. Visit biola.edu to find out how Biola could make a difference in your life.